I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell a story like this. For most of my life, my grandfather's farm was just a place, old, quiet, boring. The kind of land you drove past without even noticing, the fences leaning sideways, the paint on the barn peeling like sunburned skin, the long grass hiding rusted out tractors that hadn't moved since the 70s. When my grandfather died, it wasn't a shock. He was 93. Quiet man, stubborn, he lived alone on that property until the very end, refusing help, refusing even to move in with my parents. The farm takes care of me, he used to say, which never made much sense because the farm had been failing since before I was born. A week after the funeral, it became my job to help clean the place out. My parents wanted to sell the land. I wasn't thrilled, but there was something about walking into his empty house that felt heavier than I expected, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The first 2 days were just dust and boxes, old tools, photo albums, the usual. But on the third day, when I climbed into the attic, everything changed. The attic was low ceilinged, with beams you had to duck under and insulation spilling out like spider webs. I remember the smell, thick, moldy, almost like damp hay. I was about to turn around when I noticed something wedged between two boards, half hidden under a moth-eaten quilt. It was a book, leather-bound, cracked with age, and cold to the touch. No title, just a strange, uneven symbol carved into the cover, something like a circle with lines running through it, but not quite any shape I recognized. When I opened it, dust clouded the air. The first page was filled with my grandfather's handwriting, tight, scratchy letters that were almost impossible to read. At first, I thought it was just a farm ledger, crops planted, animals sold, weather notes, normal farmer stuff. But the more I squinted at the words, the stranger it got. His writing wasn't just hard to read, it was coded almost. Words were crossed out, sentences trailed off, and there were weird little sketches in the margins. And then I read something that froze me. The barn has shadows that don't belong to anything. They move when I'm not looking. I keep hearing the girl. I stared at those words for a long time, trying to convince myself I was misreading. My grandfather wasn't the kind of man who told ghost stories. He barely talked at all. I flipped through more pages. The entries stretched back decades, each one stranger than the last. Lost another calf, blood everywhere, no tracks leading away. Neighbors say the land is cursed. Don't let them see the mark. Saw her again by the fence. She had no eyes. I actually shut the journal at that point. My hands were shaking and I laughed out loud just to break the silence. But the laugh didn't sound right in that attic. It died too fast, swallowed by the wood. I told myself I'd stop reading. Just throw the damn thing in a box and be done. But of course I didn't. Curiosity always wins. The deeper I went, the more the entries shifted from strange to disturbing. He wrote about disappearances, not of animals but of people, locals who had gone missing. My grandfather noted dates, names, even weather conditions on the nights it happened. Some of these I remembered vaguely hearing about as a kid, unsolved cases people still whispered about. And then there was a sketch, a crude drawing of the barn. Inside the barn, drawn in darker ink, was something hunched, too many limbs, a face that looked stretched, skin pulled thin like wet paper. I felt cold crawl up my spine. That's when I heard it, something shifting below me, down in the house, a floorboard creaking, slow, heavy. I froze listening. The house was supposed to be empty. I was alone. For a full minute, I stayed crouched in that attic. The journal clutched in my hands, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. But nothing else came, just silence. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the house anymore. I stuffed the journal into my backpack and climbed down fast. That night, I stayed at the farm instead of driving back. Big mistake. It was just me, the empty house, and the journal. The power barely worked, so I lit a couple of old kerosene lamps. I sat in the kitchen, journal open in front of me, and read until the words blurred. That's when I found the first real entry that scared me to death. October 14th, 1963. The girl came into the barn tonight. I nailed the doors shut, but still heard her humming. Cows wouldn't stop thrashing. One broke its neck. The next page, October 15th, 1963. I followed her singing. It led me to the cornfield. When I came back, There were footprints on the porch. Small, bare feet. They stopped at the door. I swear to you, I stopped breathing. Because earlier that night, before I even opened the journal, I'd gone out to the porch to smoke. When I came back in, I had noticed something in the dust on the porch boards. Footprints. Small, bare feet. I told myself they had to be old, from when my cousins were kids, from some neighbor's kid years ago. Anything? But the more I tried to believe that, the more it didn't sit right. The dust was thick, undisturbed everywhere else. Those prints were fresh. I shut the journal, locked the doors, and told myself I'd sleep in the living room, shotgun nearby. But sleep never came. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, faint at first, a sound so soft I thought it was just my imagination, humming, a girl's voice, coming from the barn. I lay there frozen, every hair on my body standing up. My grandfather's words rang in my head. I nailed the door shut but still heard her humming. I wanted to believe it was just wind or some animal, but no animal hums. That was the first night I realized whatever my grandfather had written in those pages wasn't just some old man losing his mind. And the worst part, that was only the beginning. The morning after that night of humming, I left the farm in a hurry. I told myself I just needed a break, some air. Truth was, I couldn't stand being inside those walls anymore. Not after the footprints, not after the sound, but the journal, it wouldn't leave me alone. I brought it back with me to town. Every chance I got, I flipped through more pages, trying to piece together my grandfather's words. Some entries were mundane, crops, repairs, injuries, but woven between were pieces that didn't belong. Things that felt less like farm notes and more like warnings. Don't go near the east fence after sundown. That's where they whispered. 3 children missing. The sheriff won't come out anymore. I found her ribbon in the well. The entries stopped feeling random. They were building a pattern. Dates, names, seasons. So I did something stupid. I cross-checked them. I went to the library. Old microfilm machines, newspaper archives. It took hours, but eventually, the headlines began to line up with the dates in his journal. 1963, a girl named Marlene disappeared walking home from school, never found. 1971, a boy went missing near the highway, no leads. 1982, a local farmer's wife gone without a trace. Each time the dates matched, each time my grandfather wrote about hearing the girl, it wasn't just animals he thought were being taken. I started asking around, carefully. A few of the old folks in town were still alive, the ones who had lived near the farm back then. But the way they looked at me when I mentioned my grandfather's land, it was like I'd crossed a line. One old man, Mr. Higgins, said, "It plain? That place ain't right, son. Never was. Best thing you can do is burn that book and never look back." I asked why, but he just shook his head and walked away. Another woman, Mrs. Calloway, told me something even stranger. She said her grandmother used to talk about the farm long before my grandfather owned it. Back when it was just unsettled land, people claimed to see lights in the cornfield, hear voices at night. Some said the land was marked. That word stuck with me, marked, because of the symbol carved into the cover of the journal. When I asked her what it meant, she went pale. "I don't know, and I don't want to," she whispered. The more people clammed up, the more desperate I felt to dig deeper. It wasn't just my grandfather losing his mind, it was something bigger, something tied to that land long before him. That night, against every ounce of common sense, I drove back to the farm. The barn sat heavy in the dark, its roof sagging, boards loose like rotten teeth. I stood there, journal in hand, staring at it under the moonlight. The fields around me whispered with wind, but I swore I could hear something else too. A hum, low, almost buried under the crickets. I walked the perimeter, lantern in hand. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. On the east fence, carved faintly into the wood, was the same uneven circle symbol that was on the journal cover. My grandfather must have done it decades ago. Next to the carving, burned into the wood, were 5 hash marks, like tally marks. I don't know why, but my stomach turned. Back inside, I tried reading more entries to calm myself, though it only did the opposite. His handwriting in the later pages got frantic. Letters slanted, ink smudged like he was writing too fast. The girl came again. Her feet leave no prints now. She watches me through the cracks in the barn. I nailed them shut, but she still gets inside. She wanted me to follow her. I almost did. The well is hungry. Don't look down too long. I actually felt sick reading it. And then I heard it again. This time not faint, not maybe wind. A girl's voice humming from the cornfield. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the lantern against every instinct and stepped out onto the porch. The sound was clearer now, like a lullaby, carried across the stalks. I should have stayed inside. I should have locked the doors. But the journal was in my head, pushing me forward. I walked into the corn. The stalks shifted around me, tall, whispering. Every step made me feel smaller, swallowed. The humming was ahead, soft but steady. And then it stopped. Dead silence. That was somehow worse. I spun the lantern around, expecting, I don't know, an animal, a person, something. But there was nothing. Just rows and rows of corn stretching into blackness. I turned back toward the house, and that's when I saw her, just for a second. A small figure standing at the edge of the corn, pale dress glowing faint in the lantern light. Her hair hung over her face, her arms dangled too long at her sides. I froze, my breath caught, the lantern flickered, and then she was gone. No sound of running, no movement, just gone. I stumbled back to the house, slammed the door, locked it 3 times, sat there shaking until sunrise. The next morning, I told myself I imagined it. Sleep deprivation, stress, anything. But when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw something in the dust. Footprints. Small, bare, leading straight from the corn to the front door. And this time, they were facing inward, like something had been standing there, watching me all night. I didn't sleep for days after that night. The footprints, the humming, the girl in the corn. No matter how much I told myself I imagined it, the journal wouldn't let me. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. By now, my grandfather's handwriting was nearly illegible, words tilted, ink blotched, sometimes letters scratched over each other as if he was writing in the dark. He was unraveling. She won't leave. She wants me to follow. The well whispers. It knows my name. Something older than her is here, watching through her. Every line was heavier than the last. It wasn't just paranoia. It was obsession. He described nights of standing at the east fence, waiting for her voice. Nights he claimed he saw faces in the well water. The journal turned darker. The sheriff won't come back. He knows. The tally marks are not mine. I waken more are carved. I think the land is feeding her, feeding them. I had to stop more than once, my stomach knotting, but then came the entry that froze me more than any other. She came into the house, sat at the end of my bed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her face was smooth, no features, but I know she smiled. She left the ribbon on my chest. And in those final pages, my grandfather wrote something I never expected. It isn't her. She's just the voice, the lure. The real thing lives below, in the well. The well. I'd seen it 100 times growing up. A stone circle behind the barn, covered with a rotten wooden lid. We used to toss rocks in as kids, listening for the splash. Sometimes the splash never came, which we thought was just depth. Now I wasn't so sure. That night, lantern in hand, I walked out there. Every step toward that well felt wrong, like I was walking into someone else's dream. The cornfield pressed against the sky, black and endless. The barn loomed like it was listening. The well's lid was half collapsed. I pulled it back, the wood soft with rot. The smell hit me instantly. Damp, metallic, almost sweet. Not water. Something else. Not humming, whispering. Dozens of voices, layered, rising from the depths. Some clear, some broken. My name was in there. I swear to you, I heard my name. The lantern shook in my hand. I wanted to run, but then something moved down there. A pale shape rising just enough for me to see an arm, thin, wrong, bent at too many joints, reaching upward. I dropped the lid back fast, stumbled backward, and didn't stop running until I was inside the house, door locked, journal clutched like a weapon. That night, I dreamed of my grandfather. He was sitting at the kitchen table, journal in front of him, eyes hollow. He looked at me and said, "It's not the girl, it's what's beneath her." I woke up gasping, my chest heavy like someone had been sitting on me. The lamp beside me was out, and on the floor, just inside the doorway, was something I knew wasn't there when I'd gone to bed. A ribbon. faded, red, exactly like the one my grandfather described. The journal's last entries were the worst. I can't fight it anymore. She waits at the fence each night. She hums until I open the door. I followed once. She led me to the well. It opened its mouth. The farm is not mine, never was. It belongs to it, to her, to what she serves. If I go missing, it won't be an accident. Don't look for me. Burn this land. The final page wasn't words, it was a drawing. My grandfather's hand shaky, desperate, the well, and from it, dozens of hands reaching up. Small hands, children's hands. I couldn't read anymore. Because I knew what he meant. The missing children, the whispers, the footprints, they weren't just stories, they were offerings. And somehow my grandfather had lived with it for decades. That night, I made the mistake of leaving the journal on the table while I tried to sleep. I woke up to the sound of humming again, not outside this time, inside. The kitchen. The kitchen. I crept to the doorway, every nerve screaming. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching, and there she was, a girl, sitting at the table, my grandfather's journal open in front of her. Her hair hung over her face, black and wet. She turned her head slowly toward me, and where her eyes should have been just smooth, pale skin. The humming stopped. Her mouth opened. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was dozens, all at once, all whispering. My name. I bolted, grabbed the journal, slammed the door shut, locked it. But even as I pressed my back against it, shaking, I heard the whispers seep through the cracks. The deeper I went into the journal, the more his words stopped sounding like a farmer and more like a man being hunted. His handwriting, once steady and neat, began to slope and scratch across the page like he was writing in a panic. One entry, dated October 14th, 1962, read, "The barn isn't safe after dark. The cattle refuse to enter and I hear them breathing even when the stalls are empty." Another page just had 3 words, written over and over again until the ink bled through. "It watches me." At first, I thought he meant wolves or trespassers. But then I noticed he never called it an animal. He always called it it. The entries turned darker with each passing day. He wrote about shapes he saw standing at the tree line just outside the glow of the lantern. Sometimes he swore he could hear them whisper his name. The most chilling part? He wrote that he found small handprints in the mud outside the barn, even though there were no children on the farm. Then came the entry that made me put the journal down for a moment. It said, "If I disappear, it will not be by my own hand. It wants the bloodline, not just the land. Whoever finds this, leave before it claims you too." His last few pages weren't words anymore. They were drawings, frantic, uneven sketches of something that looked like a tall, thin figure with hollow eyes. He drew it in the fields, in the barn, even inside the house. The final sketch was of the farmhouse attic, the exact spot where I found the journal.